We couldn't have a conversation about trifle without talking about a classic English trifle. And that is a beautiful bowl layered with sponge cake, pastry cream, and fresh berries. I've started off by warming 8 eggs in their shell. I'll break 6 eggs into my mixing bowl and then separate 2. To the eggs, I'll add a cup of sugar and then whip that combination on high speed until it triples in volume. Now for the flour, I'll measure out 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And I'll sift the flour with a pinch of salt. I let the mixer do the work here. I put it on low speed and work the flour in. That way, I'm assured I'll have a cake with no lumps. I've got the flour worked in now, which means it's time for a little butter. I've melted a 1/4 cup of butter, and this goes into the batter. Quick fold in, and it's time to bake the sponge cake. Just like the dacquoise, you want to use a sheet pan. I'll scrape the batter into the pan and then spread it out to make sure it's level. The sponge cake bakes for 25 minutes in a 350 oven. After the cake comes out of the oven, you want to let it cool completely, and this is what it looks like. So I've got my cake looked after. Now it's time for the custard component, a classic pastry cream. I'll start by heating my milk, 2 cups, and I want to work in some flavor, 2 teaspoons of vanilla bean paste. And while the milk is heating, I'll get my eggs ready. I have 6 eggs, but I only need the yolks for the pastry cream. That adds the richness and that beautiful flavor to any custard. To the 6 egg yolks, I'll add 6 tablespoons of sugar and a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Give this a little whisk to combine it. Before I actually start cooking the pastry cream, I get my last step ready. So I have a bowl with a 1/4 cup of butter and the strainer placed over it. That way, the hot cooked pastry cream goes right into it, melting the butter, and I'm all set. Bubbles have just started breaking the surface, so I can take it off the heat and then introduce it to the cold egg. This goes back onto the stove, into the pot, and using your whisk, you whisk this until you just see a few bubbles break the surface of the custard. There it is, beautifully glossy and thick. I'll just push this through the strainer over the butter. Stir that together. Before I set this aside to cool to room temperature, I put a piece of plastic on the surface of the pastry cream. And here it is, chilled, beautiful, and thick. To lighten it up to get ready for assembly, I have some whipped cream here. It's 1.5 cups of total that I've whipped up, so it makes about 3 cups. And I only fold a little of this in. To lighten up the pastry cream, I want to save the rest for the top of the trifle. The last component on that checklist for trifle, 4 cups of fresh berries. To sweeten them up, I'm going to add a bit of berry jam, about 2/3 of a cup of the jam. Now, to get my cake ready, it's already loosened from the sides of the pan, so I'll tip it out. And then, of course, you have the decision of what kind of trifle bowl to use. Maybe you don't have a trifle bowl at all. Well, you know what? It's amazing what you can come up with. This isn't technically a trifle bowl. What counts is you've got straight glass sides to show off all those beautiful layers. So I found a plate that's the same size as the mouth of this bowl, So what I'll do is just use a paring knife, and this is my template, and I'll cut out 3 layers of sponge cake. Now for this recipe, I'm gonna start with cake at the base. And then I'll brush the layer with a simple syrup. This ensures that the cake will stay nice and moist. I'll just spoon in the pastry cream. That way I can direct where it's going. And then on goes a layer of the berries. Now I'm ready for another cake layer. And the finishing touch is this layer of whipped cream on top. Just a sprinkling of fresh berries. And lastly, some toasted almonds. With a dessert like this, you are all set to impress.